Well, hello, Joy readers. This is Jenna Lee here, and I have my friend, I have my fellow writer and traveler, Tammy Aston, with us today. And we are going to talk about this marvelous book called Mindset, A New Psychology for Success by Dr. Carol Dweck. But let me tell you a little bit about Tammy, and then I'll let her tell a little bit about herself. Tammy and I are both a part of a writing group, and we encourage each other. We help each other with our writings, with our readings, and also with going to conferences, which we are planning to go to one in September. She is a somatic wellness coach, and she has a platform. She has a presence on Substack. And at the end of this video, I will for sure give you her contact information. So I present to you Mrs. Tammy Aston. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, Jenna. It's so good seeing you again. I know we're
You
also travel buddies.
You
So we did some
are.
traveling together. So it's always a joy to spend time with you. And we both love reading books. So why not get together and talk about the books we're reading?
Talk about him. Talk about
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Well, what do you want to start off telling us about this book before we get into some of the questions?
So I found this book through another book. So the book that So first off, I want to mention it's not often that I remember where I learned about a book. And the fact that I remember where I found this book, how I found this book, um, is in itself profound because the name of the book, the author, and the concepts really stuck with me. When Jenna suggested that when she mentioned the book, I knew instantly the book that she was talking about. And I was like, oh my God, I love that book. And I found it through a book by Anne Janzer called The Writing Process.
Mm.
And she talks about, different mindsets that writers have to have, specifically like the muse and the scribe. Like there's times where you have to rest your mind and let stuff percolate, and then there's times where you have to get your pen out and scribe some words. um so both of those books have stuck with me. I am familiar with, like, I can remember the name of the book, I can remember the author, and both books I know where I learned about them from. So it is an impactful book, and I'm glad to be talking about it.
Wow, that's so interesting. I jotted that book down, The Writing Process. And that's interesting because when you read this book, The Mindset, she doesn't necessarily talk to authors. She talks to a lot of different professions and people, but I don't recall if she particularly talked to authors. But if you are an author or a writer, this book is important. This book is super important because you're, as a writer, this is how I feel. You are saying to the world, my writing is worth reading. And so if you are saying that there has to be a certain level of confidence that you have to put that out to the world because you're going to be critiqued.
Yeah,
And somebody might say, oh, yes, I love it. It was the best. And some might be neutral. And some might say, oh, no, go back to the drawing board. So you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position when you put your writing out to the world.
right.
And I can definitely see that. I can make that connection now with this book.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned my Substack. And I feel extremely vulnerable posting on my Substack. My Substack is more for my coaching journey, but I also include personal stories.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we have experiences that are extremely personal,
Right.
and it makes us feel vulnerable when we share them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to do a little bit more thinking about that too with this book in terms of the writing. I read the book at the suggestion of a YouTuber about books that really changed her business. So that's the sort of the mindset that I was coming from is more entrepreneurial and leadership. That's the other thing too. But I can see it. I'm, beginning to kind of, the wheels are turning in my head about it as a writer and as an author.
Hmm.
Unless you are, the Stephen Kings of the world or, Colleen McCullough, some of these big writers, you will have to do some work to get your work out there as an, with an agent or self-publishing, indie publishing, that kind of thing. But then you got to market it. And
Yep.
so it takes, like I said, a level of confidence to do that as a writer. And most writers are introverts. The last thing they want to do is market a book and talk to people
Yep.
about their book.
Yep.
So there
Can I
has,
just write the book and somebody else handle all that?
yeah, yeah,
But that's
yes.
expensive.
It is. All
Yeah.
right, well, let's get into talking about the book. So she talks about two different mindsets, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And would you mind just telling our audience about the fixed mindset and then the growth mindset?
Sure. So the fixed mindset is the belief that we have where we think things are written in stone, like we
Mhm.
can't change. Um, things are as they are. Like one example that comes to mind is, my husband, I've been married for about 2 years now, and my husband doesn't like it when I experiment with dinner because he says Miss Evelyn didn't prepare it, so I'm not open to it. So Evelyn is his mom, and he said if his mom didn't cook it growing up, then it's not meant for dinner. And we're of a certain age that a lot of things have changed in the food industry since then.
Yes, they have.
So that's a good example for me for a fixed mindset.
Mm,
It also can be like beliefs that we have about ourselves, like limiting beliefs that we
right.
have,
Mm,
that we think are set in stone, that we
right.
can't change. Like I grew up in a family of poverty, and
Mhm.
so some people may relate to the sorry, I got to the having a poverty mindset. So
Mm,
that's a fixed mindset. And you can go about life thinking that that's the end of the road,
mm,
that if you grew up in poverty, you're always going to be in poverty.
right.
But that's not true. Um,
Mhm.
and that's where the growth mindset comes in, because the growth mindset means that you believe that you can learn and adapt and
Right.
learn new things, and
Hmm.
therefore your life grows. And I can definitely relate to that. I'm no longer living in poverty, but I still have some, remnants of, having a poverty mindset that I have to work on.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how she kind of comes up with those two different mindsets, fixed and growth, because they tend to look like they're very opposite from each other. But then she talks about that there's some people who have a combination of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's good in that sense because then you can get yourself out of this sort of set in stone, structured way of thinking into a different mindset. And
Yeah.
some people don't know if they have fixed or growth mindset, really. They're not aware of that until you start looking at which the examples and things that she's giving, especially in some of the industries, right? She'll show
Mhm.
you, okay, well, you think that in this business you have a growth mindset, but really you have a fixed mindset
Yeah.
because we can see the examples in, A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
But what I thought was really interesting about her book is that when you discover which one you can have the growth mindset or you can have more of the growth mindset. None of that is set in stone.
Yep.
Yeah, did you see
I
that as
resonate with
well?
that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's been my own experience. Like, I knew for me that, getting my education was my ticket out of poverty. And
Right,
so I looked for ways to pay for college. For me, that was joining the military and taking the benefit of, having the college fund and the GI Bill.
right. Yeah,
So that allowed me to, um, and that helped too. It definitely helped, just, education itself, the process of getting your education,
right.
really helped with my mindset as well, showing
Mhm.
me, that I do have a growth mindset.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. And even she goes on to talk about intelligence because I think a lot of people think because if you get your IQ tested, so you're in middle school, high school, that's the number you are stuck with and that's what it is. It is what it is. But she gives a lot of research examples to show that that is not necessarily true. You may not be genius level like Albert Einstein, but
Hmm.
your intelligence can grow.
Yep.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. That is encouraging.
Absolutely, it really is. And I think if a lot more high school and college age people, students knew that, they might go on to do bigger things, right?
Hmm.
Because they see that, yes, they can learn, they can grow,
Yeah.
their mind can expand. And there's
Yeah.
lots of other things that they can do, and not limit themselves and say, well,
Yeah.
this is the best it's going to get.
Yeah. I know with my daughter, my daughter, she's in her mid 30s now, but when she was a C average student in high school, and she didn't really hit her stride until college, and then she went to three different colleges before she hit the college that allowed her to thrive. So
Wow.
she went from, getting a D in accounting in high school to getting a straight A in accounting in college, because she
Wow.
changed her mindset. I mean,
Yeah.
and she talks about it now. She'll be like, it became addictive, making the honor roll and,
Mm-hmm.
the honor society and all that. It became like once she made that first A,
Yes.
then it became addictive and she wanted to get more A's. And she'll say she wished she had applied herself more in high school,
Mm-hmm.
but for her, it took longer. So I think, young people need to hear that too, and parents, because some parents will
Yes.
give up after the first college try.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it takes time for us to figure out what works for us. And so had I
Right.
given up on her on the
Mm-hmm.
first college try or the second college try, she would have never she would have never went to that level.
Right. That's a great example. Absolutely. And I think sometimes within yourself, I can do this. I just need the right space.
Yeah.
And my story is probably a little bit similar to hers, except for in high school, I did very well. In college, the first time I struggled. Then when I went back to college the next time, I found my stride and I did really well because I enjoyed everything I was learning. It's just that first time around, didn't really enjoy all of that. It was such a struggle. But I knew somewhere within myself that I had it. I just had to find whatever it was. And that's a great advice to give a young person if you're
Yep.
mentoring them or they're in some sort of leadership program is that it may take a minute for you to find where you fit in academically,
Yep.
but you will find it.
Yeah. Keep searching. That's what I tell people. Keep searching. Keep
Absolutely.
searching until you find what resonates with you.
Yeah. Now, when you did her book, did you listen to it on audio or did you read it on paper?
I read it. I
Right.
read it on Kindle.
Okay. I listened to the audio. I think that I should have probably gotten audio and the paper, which sometimes I do. But because it was easy to understand, I followed the audio pretty well, and the voice was, pleasant to listen to. So that made it easier. But I
Hmm.
want to ask now, as a writer, the way
Hmm.
that she structured her book, and maybe you read more nonfiction books than I do. I don't read that many nonfiction books. But I just thought it was very interesting how she arranged the book. Of course, she talks about the two mindsets, and then she
Hmm.
starts to get into some of the categories, the sports, the leadership, business, and relationships. Then she circles back to the mindset again. So, did you have any thoughts about how she arranged the book? Did you think it was, different as a lot of other nonfiction books that, cover some of the same topics?
Hmm. I have thought about why this book resonates with me. To the point that I can remember, I know her name. I can quote the author and I can quote the title. And I'm not sure why. And your question makes me wonder if the way she structured the book allows for it to be easy enough to remember. And
Mm,
then I think too, some of the examples she uses, we all can relate to. A lot of us have kids in sports or grandkids in sports. We're all working adults. A lot of us are working adults, and so we understand business. We're all in relationships. And so I
mm-hmm,
think she made the content relatable.
mm-hmm.
So I
Yes.
do think the way I do think there's something to be said about the way she wrote that definitely the way she organized the content.
Mm-hmm. Because then everyone can read this book and find themselves.
Yes,
You're in
absolutely.
one of those categories.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I say this too in terms of when you are a person who is interested in developing yourself in leadership or entrepreneurship, then you must have a constant feed for that.
yeah,
And I feel like this book is a really good one. It might be a very foundational book for that. So that you're not listening just to yourself and your own
yeah,
thoughts. You are listening to thought leaders. You are listening
yeah,
to people who are actually doing some research. Her book is
yeah,
very research based,
yeah. And two, I
very
think I
research.
think when you listen to thought leaders, the thought leaders' words and action, they become something you resonate with. So you can now start thinking along the lines of, what's being presented in the book.
Mhm. I mean, you can almost think that you're going to be an Olympian. Listening to her story. Listen to her. I had to calm myself. I was like, now wait a minute, Dr. Dre. I understand that. I'm in agreement but I am not a runner. I've tried it a million times. I can try it a million more times. I'm only a runner like in my dreams.
So Jenna, would you say that's a fixed mindset or a growth
That's a fix.
mindset?
I'm sorry. That's a fix. I wanted to so badly think I could grow mindset for that. But what I said was, okay, no, that might not be your area. You're going to do in leadership.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Have your growth mindset over there. I think it is an encouraging book. I would love for a lot more schools to learn about this and to help the students, especially the ones that are struggling and just not really grasping things and thinking they can't grasp it.
right.
It is definitely possible for them to do it. I think they
Yeah,
would be a lot more successful their teachers, their principal, their parents, like you said, their
yeah,
parents, everybody on the same page with that.
yeah, yeah. I think we'd be a much better world.
We definitely would.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, did I skip over the question to ask? which one do you would say you are? Well, what one would you say, not now, but what would you say maybe your teenage young adult self? Fixed growth or somewhere in between?
I think I think I've always had somewhere in between. So I knew there was a way out of poverty. You know, I didn't let, I didn't let the kids, that lived on the other side of town in the nice houses influence, what I thought I could do. But at the same time, in some of my own, even becoming a coach, you still have to overcome your own obstacles, your
Mhm.
own limiting beliefs. So I think having limiting beliefs about yourself that you think, when a limiting belief comes up, that's a perfect example of what is still part of the fixed mindset that you have. And then as a coach, that's what I help people do. I help people, um, transition to different mindsets so they can achieve, whatever goals they have for themselves. So I think I've always been a
Mhm.
combination of both.
Mhm.
But I think I have more of the growth mindset um,
Yeah. Well,
in
I'm
me.
certainly glad that I learned about this in this season of my life because I think it's so important to keep feeling and moving towards that growth mindset and not to say, well, because I'm a certain age or because of this happened in my life, that I can't move forward and, still reach my dreams and goals. I think it's so positive and it's so reassuring to see the examples that she has in her book
Mhm.
that, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. And to
Yeah,
still
absolutely.
really get yourself in that mindset and thinking, and then the actions will follow.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to take action. Sometimes it requires taking action to figure out, what the next step is.
Yeah.
You can't have it. I think that's probably been I did my coaches training recently, and that's probably been like one of the biggest lessons that I have overcome. Like having a fixed mindset could be, oh, well, I'm going to do my coaches training and then I'm going to launch and then I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. Or as authors, we do it, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to release it on this date. And then I send it to the editor and it doesn't go like I thought it did. So I've got to go back and forth, with the editor, and then we've got to get our marketing done.
Hmm.
And so, to me, it's like when you allow things to happen, when you give space and you allow things to happen, think wonderful things happen.
Wonderful things happen.
Wonderful
Absolutely.
things happen.
Wow. Well, thank you, Tammy, for coming on and talking about Dr. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, A New Psychology for Success. Great nonfiction book for any and everybody. I really would highly recommend that book and that you get it, that you read it, and that you pass it on so
Yeah,
that
and
everybody can really
let us
enjoy.
know what you think in the comments,
Absolutely,
wherever you're watching this
absolutely,
video from. And thank you for
absolutely,
bringing the book up in our. I mean, I know we were traveling together when you brought the book up, so thank you for your willingness to talk about it, and then even asking me to be on this show with you. So thank you, Jenna.
absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome.